Hello, learning birds. This is Mr. Buffington talking about the literary device of foreshadowing today. Foreshadowing is making a reference. It's often a vague reference, but a reference to something that is to come later on in the story. Foreshadowing is used to build suspense, and it helps the reader to guess what might happen in the future. That's what foreshadowing is. Let's look at some examples from literature. Romeo and Juliet on the balcony. In the famous balcony scene, Romeo says, "Life were better ended by their hate than death prorogued waiting for thy love." So basically he's saying that it would be better to have Juliet's love for a short time than to endure a long life without her. And spoiler alert, he gets his wish. He gets that love for her for a short amount of time, and then he dies. So, again, this is foreshadowing, him saying, I'd rather live a life with you and have some love than to live a long life not ever having that love. Of Mice and Men is a great example of foreshadowing, from the title of the book to subtle hints throughout of what's going to happen. The biggest example of foreshadowing, I think, is, and the most obvious example, is that there's a man in the book named Candy. He has a dog who needs to be put down. And Candy doesn't have the courage to kill the dog himself. And later he says, I ought to have shot that dog myself. He later thinks back on how he let someone else kill the dog, and he thinks, I should have kind of manned up and shot the dog myself. As the book is concluding, George, one of the characters, needs to choose if he will kill Lenny himself or if he will let Lenny die by the hands of strangers. So he has that decision to make that parallels the decision Candy made earlier on in the book. Again, a great book. There's hints of things to come all throughout this book. It's a wonderful example of foreshadowing, and it helps build up the suspense in the book. Foreshadowing can also be done in characters' actions. For example, a character may have a small decision to make at the beginning of the book that will be mirrored at the end of the book. Here's an example. A character might encourage punishment of someone who steals an apple from the market at the beginning of the book. Then maybe he's starving later on and he sees some food and he steals it at the end of the book so that he can live, or maybe to feed his family or something like that. So again, the situation can be basically the same and have the character make different choices if the character has grown and changed, but the first encounter would sort of foreshadow that this may be happening again. All right, and here's an example from in my writings. I wrote a book called The Stones of Power, The Exile. There's a character at the beginning of the book who's studying ancient prophecies about the end of the world. Although he completely misunderstands these prophecies, the things that he studies happen later on during the book. And if you read through the books and the book series, you'll see these things happening and see how it relates back to him reading that original prophecy of the end of the world. So in the first chapter of the first book, you see hints of things that are going to happen throughout. Even though it's not completely clear how they'll happen, those things need to happen before the final battle occurs. So I have a couple of examples here of things foreshadowing. I want you to take a guess at what might happen based on the paragraph. In the small hamlet of Dungan, a young man looked longingly at the dirt road that led out of town. Although his entire life he dreamed of leaving, things had changed now. Things had changed, and he now knew he would never leave. So what do we think might happen? Maybe he'll leave, right? He's looking down the road wishing that he could leave, but he feels held back. Maybe something's going to happen that's going to push him so that he has to leave, perhaps. All right, let's take another paragraph here. Jake watched as the small ant strode up to the pile of corn. There was no way the small creature could move even the smallest kernel, but that didn't stop the ant from trying. All right, so there's an example of a paragraph of Jake watching these ants. Perhaps Jake is going to face a larger challenge than he thinks he can overcome on his own. and just see if he's going to keep trying even though failure is imminent. So that's a way that foreshadowing can come into play with a story. It can be very subtle, but it definitely hints at things to come. One note about foreshadowing is that sometimes the author will leave hints throughout the book and then change them to keep you guessing. This is often used in mystery novels so that the reader keeps guessing at what will happen, and these hints are called a red herring, hinting at something that'll happen that never actually comes. So just a quick recap, what is foreshadowing? Foreshadowing is a reference, often vague, of things that are to come, and foreshadowing is used to build suspense and helps the readers guess at what will be happening next. Hope that lesson was helpful for you. Have a great day.